Hey guys, tonight we begin with something quiet, delicate, and absolutely suffocating, a day in the life of a woman in feudal Japan. Picture it, you're waking up in a paper-walled house where every movement is a whisper and every whisper is judged. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but guess what? You have. You open your eyes to the sound of your mother-in-law's sandals shuffling across the wooden floor. The air is crisp, and not in a pleasant autumn morning way. It's cold because insulation doesn't exist, and heating means sit closer to the fire, but don't enjoy it too much. You're wrapped in thin futon bedding that's just good enough to keep you from freezing, but not from thinking about how you're already behind on the morning tasks. So you rise quietly, always quietly. You slide open the shoji screen and shuffle out knees sore from the hard floor, your spine creaking like a bamboo water fountain. You're not supposed to creak. Women aren't supposed to sound like anything. Your job is to be like a shadow, present, but unseen. The first task of the day is lighting the hearth, which sounds simple until you realize the firewood is damp. The kindling was eaten by mice, and you're only allowed to make just enough smoke to not annoy the household patriarch. Your husband. He's still asleep. Of course he is. He's a samurai, a warrior, a man, which means he gets to lounge under his heavier, warmer futon while you shiver into action like a wind-up servant with good posture. You shuffle across the tatami mats, careful not to step on any edges. Stepping on the edge is not only bad form, it's bad manners. And in a house like this, bad manners are just short of moral failure. So you tiptoe, carrying water in a heavy wooden bucket, balanced from the well, then prep the rice scrape, yesterday's fish bones, into the compost pot, and reheat miso soup that smells like humility. Oh, and the kitchen, it's outside. Or semi-outside, or at least far enough from the main rooms to ensure your toil stays separate from his sleep. You cook bent forward like a comma, trying not to cough, as ash kicks up from the charcoal stove. You get one bowl of rice, maybe two if you're lucky, and a small side of pickled radish. But don't think of eating it yet. First, serve the men. Always serve the men. You kneel, bow slide the tray forward, without spilling, and retreat like a ninja of domestic labor. Your husband yawns and ignores your presence completely. That's fine. That's normal. You've done your duty. While he eats you clean, you fold bedding, sweep the walkway, and start prepping for lunch. It's been 2 hours. You haven't spoken a word. In fact, no one has addressed you by name yet today. And they might not at all. As the day rolls on, your tasks blend into a quiet pattern of labor washing, mending, carrying, obeying. You change into your work kimono, which by the way is about 15 layers too complicated. The obi, basically a decorative straitjacket, has to be tied perfectly. A crooked knot isn't just sloppy, it's shameful. Your hands are raw from scrubbing rice bowls, and the only cream you have is yesterday's leftover tofu water. Spa day, this is not. Meanwhile, your husband sharpens his katana in the yard looking solemn. He might go to the castle today. Or not. He's moody like that. You're not allowed to ask. Asking implies curiosity. Curiosity implies agency. Agency implies opinion. And guess what? You're not entitled to one. Now, here's a historical fact to sprinkle in your rice bowl. In feudal Japan, especially under the Tokugawa shogunate, women were legally subordinate to men through a system called Onna Daigaku, basically the Confucian guidebook for how to be a good woman. It taught obedience to father, then husband, then son. In other words, your loyalty chain runs upward and downward, but never outward. You're a relational ghost, a useful one, but a ghost nonetheless. Historians still argue whether this structure gave women a kind of quiet power within the household or simply cemented their invisibility. Either way, your role is defined so tightly it may as well be calligraphed on your birth certificate. Speaking of which, if you were born into a samurai family, congratulations. That means you have slightly nicer hair oil and a bigger closet of responsibilities. As the morning fog lifts, you try to sneak a look at your reflection in the water jar. Your eyebrows are plucked into tiny arcs. Your teeth? Oh, yes. About that. There was a fashion trend called ohaguro, blackening one's teeth with iron filings and vinegar. Why? Because white teeth were considered animalistic. Black teeth showed loyalty and elegance. So you smile looking like a dental goth because tradition says you must. Midday arrives. You finally eat something. A few mouthfuls of rice, a pickle, a sip of barley tea. It tastes like doing your best with limited options. Then it's back to chores. Your hands are cracked. Your back aches. And the sun isn't even halfway done. You haven't written a poem. You haven't seen a friend. You haven't sat down for more than 30 seconds. But you've kept the family functioning, the home clean, the food served, the expectations intact. And when your husband finally leaves for the day, you bow again. He nods. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, the real relief is that for a few hours, you're not being watched. That is until your mother-in-law decides to check if you folded the laundry respectfully or just adequately. One earns respect. The other earns a cold stare and a comment about how your own mother clearly failed at raising you. So you take a breath. A shallow one. Deep sighs are considered rude. And you carry on. Now, just because you're not nobility doesn't mean you're exempt from looking the part. Welcome to the silent agony of grooming in feudal Japan, a process that is less about self-expression and more about proving that you know your place quietly and with a straight spine. You start with your hair. Every morning, you have to brush, oil comb twist, and pin your hair into a style so exacting it might as well be a religious ritual. It's called the shimada, a kind of knot at the back that noble women wear like a satellite dish of status. And yes, it must be smooth. No frizz. Frizz is social failure. The oil sesame if you're lucky. Rancid if you're not. The comb wooden, but you use it gently to avoid snapping hair, and you know your will to live. Then comes the face powder. Oh yes, the iconic white face that says, I am wealthy enough to avoid the sun, made from rice flour and sometimes containing lead, because who doesn't love a good slow poison glamour? This powder is thick, chalky, and gets everywhere. It clogs your pores, dries your skin, and tastes awful when it inevitably ends up in your mouth. You apply it in silence, crouched near a bronze mirror, so cloudy it reflects your future more clearly than your face. Next, the teeth. Yep, still black. You have to reapply the ohaguro. Every few days, burnt iron filings mixed with vinegar and tree sap. It stinks, it tastes worse, and once it's on your teeth, it stays there. Forever. It's considered beautiful, elegant, proper. It also means you can't really smile without looking like you've been chewing coal. Which in a way you have. And don't forget the eyebrows. Or should we say, the former eyebrows? Because here's the fun part, you shave them off, completely. Then draw on 2 tiny black half moons way up on your forehead. Why? Because tradition says it shows refinement. Historians still debate whether this trend evolved from Chinese influence or court fashion trickling down over centuries. Either way, it turns your face into a mask of social obedience. You don't have a face anymore. You have a canvas for everyone else's expectations. Now for the kimono. You don't just throw it on like sweatpants. No. This is a layer cake of dignity, restraint, and extremely limited mobility. Underlayers, mid-layers, outer layers. Linens and summer silks in winter, because logic was apparently busy that year. You wrap each layer tightly, tie it with cords, and finish with the obi, a thick sash that cinches everything together into a posture-correcting, lung-compressing bow of elegance. If you breathe too deep, it creaks. If you tie it wrong, it's shameful. And heaven help you if you're menstruating, because there's no modern hygiene, and now you've got to manage that inside 5 layers of delicate cloth. You might be thinking, at least noble women had some leisure, right? Sort of. They didn't work the fields. But their days were filled with needlework, poetry, practice, music lessons, and the endless rehearsal of being perfectly still. They trained in etiquette like it was martial arts. How to bow at the right angle. How to pour tea without looking up. How to hide your hands when laughing so as not to show teeth which are already black. But modesty is a double layer too. And you must always appear serene. You can be angry. Just do it elegantly. You can be tired, but look radiant while doing it. The more silent suffering you can radiate, the more admired you are. That's the game. Grace under pressure wasn't just admired, it was demanded. And here's the kicker. Even geishas, who were technically more independent than most women, were also subjected to this image trap. Their look was exaggerated white faces, elaborate wigs, crimson lips, and their behavior was highly codified. Yes, they learned music, dance, and witty conversation. But their survival depended on maintaining a carefully constructed image of pleasure and perfection. One slip, one wrong guest offended, and your career could evaporate like sake on a hot stone. Geishas weren't prostitutes, contrary to popular myth, but they weren't free either. Their lives were contracts, literal ones, with debt curfews and chaperones. Even beauty was business. But back to you. You're not a geisha. You're just a woman doing her daily grooming, trying not to mess up a routine that takes half the morning but earns you precisely 0 thanks. Your husband doesn't notice. Your in-laws only notice if you miss a step, and your own opinion on how you look irrelevant. You're not dressing for yourself. You're dressing for a role. And while we're on the subject, do you like the color red? Great. You're not allowed to wear it unless you're a bride or a geisha. Want to show your shoulders? Scandalous. Prefer something practical? Sorry. Practicality is for men. You get long sleeves that drag in the dirt and patterns you didn't choose. Woven in silks you have to wash by hand while not looking sweaty. Oh, and perfume. Maybe a dab of incense rubbed into your sleeves if you're high-ranking enough. Otherwise, you're expected to smell like soap and sacrifice. But not too much soap. Soap's expensive, and water isn't always warm. This isn't vanity. This is armor. Quiet, soft, perfectly tailored armor. You wear it every day, not to stand out, but to disappear beautifully. By the time you finally finished preparing yourself, half the day is gone. Your face itches under the powder, your stomach is empty, and your back aches from kneeling. But you look perfect, quietly perfect, which means you've succeeded. You are property. Not in the poetic beloved wife sense, not in the we own each other's hearts kind of way. No, you are quite literally considered property under the law in feudal Japan. A walking, breathing transaction. You're the rice bowl that can carry children. You're the ink seal on a family alliance. You're a vessel, a political tool with great hair and no vote. Let's rewind a bit. Your marriage. You didn't choose it. No romantic moonlit confessions. No nervous hand-holding by the koi pond. You were arranged. Strategically, like a piece on a go board. Your family negotiated your marriage like a business merger, and you weren't invited to the meeting. Your future husband could be 30 years older. He could already have a wife. He could be cruel, or kind, or boring. None of that mattered. What mattered was the status match, and how many silkworms your father was promised in return. The wedding was a quiet affair, not because it was elegant, but because you weren't supposed to be the center of attention. The bride's family was expected to show humility, and you bowed your head so low during the ceremony, it's a miracle your neck still works. You wore bright red to signal joy, but you didn't feel joy. You felt like luggage, decorated and moved from one home to another. Once you entered your husband's house, you became part of his family entirely. Your old surname gone. Your parents, still technically yours, but now low-priority contacts. Your loyalty is expected to shift overnight. Your mother-in-law becomes your boss, your father-in-law, your judge, and your husband, your owner. He has legal authority over your body, your finances if you had any, and your behavior. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Under Tokugawa law, a husband had the legal right to divorce his wife for any one of 7 offenses known as the shichikaku. These included disobedience, infertility, jealousy, and talking too much. Yes, talking too much. A little sarcasm, grounds for expulsion. Meanwhile, you had no legal grounds to divorce him, unless he abandoned you completely or committed treason, and even then good luck proving it. Historians still argue whether this dynamic softened over time in certain regions, or whether certain women wielded subtle influence through household management. But make no mistake, the letter of the law was not on your side. You were seen as unstable, emotional, and in need of male guidance. Like a decorative bonsai tree, beautiful to look at, and carefully trimmed into shape by someone else. Once married, your job was to bear children, specifically sons. A girl might be loved. Maybe. But a boy secured your place. If you had no sons, your position was shaky. Your husband could take a concubine, or divorce you. Or worse, your in-laws could push you aside like yesterday's pickled plums. You might still live in the house, but as a shadow version of yourself. A wife in name only. A cautionary tale for the younger girls. If you were lucky enough to have a son, your status rose, but not your autonomy. You didn't get to name him. You didn't decide his education or his future. That was for your husband and his father. You raised the child, fed him, bathed him, sang lullabies. But you weren't raising your child. You were raising the family heir. He didn't belong to you. He belonged to the house. Let's not forget the dowry. When you married, your family had to provide one. Money, land, textiles, maybe a nice set of lacquered bowls. This was supposed to help you settle in your new life. In practice, it gave your in-laws more reasons to treat you like an investment with expected returns. If anything went wrong, say a miscarriage or a failed crop, you were quietly blamed. You brought bad luck. Maybe your dowry wasn't generous enough. Maybe your ancestors were offended. Either way, you'd better keep your head down. And you did. You learned to smile through ceremonies, to pour tea without making eye contact, to fold his clothes just right because a sloppy fold reflected a sloppy soul. You even learned to sleep lightly so you'd be ready if your husband summoned you at night, not for conversation. There was no concept of marital consent. That idea wouldn't appear for centuries. If your husband wanted you, you had no say. If he didn't want you, you had no recourse. You were supposed to be grateful either way, to serve without complaint, to endure without praise. Some women rebelled quietly. A misplaced hairpin here, a late meal there. Whispered jokes in the bathhouse. Sarcastic poetry, folded into fans. But open resistance, dangerous, deadly. The family name had to be protected, and if that meant punishing you, so be it. You were the branch expected to bend, never break. So each day you wake up in the house that owns you. You care for a man who can dismiss you with a scroll. You love children who might be taken from you. You perform duties that are seen but never celebrated. You are not wife. You are not mother. You are Kanai, the inside person, meant to stay out of sight and in your place. And you do, because it's the only way to survive. He sharpens his blade with the quiet focus of someone who believes he is doing something noble, something necessary. The steel glints in the morning light, and for a brief moment, you forget that the same man polishing that katana is also the one who can ruin your life with a sigh. Your husband is a samurai, and that might sound impressive until you realize what it means for you. Samurai pride themselves on loyalty, honor, and discipline. But none of those virtues extend to how they treat their wives. In public, he bows respectfully. In private, his expectations are sharper than his sword. If he is in a good mood, you are invisible. If he is in a bad mood, you are the first thing in his line of sight. The samurai code, Bushido, guides him like scripture. But Bushido doesn't include kindness to his wife. It tells him how to serve his lord, how to face death, how to avenge dishonor. It tells him that shame must be met with punishment, and when he feels dishonored, guess who often bears the brunt of that shame? You guessed it. You. He comes home late some nights, half drunk on sake and full of quiet anger. Maybe his superior scolded him. Maybe he lost a small bet. Maybe he simply didn't like the weather. Whatever it is, he won't say. He'll sit at the low table, expression blank. You'll kneel nearby, waiting for a command. If you speak, he might ignore you. If you don't speak, he might accuse you of sulking. Either way, it's wrong. A historical fact here, samurai had legal protections when it came to disciplining their households, including their wives. A man could strike his wife without consequence if it was seen as correction. Correction. Like an ink blot on a scroll. Like a crooked nail in a floorboard. You, the human being, are also a thing to be hammered straight. Historians still argue whether the extent of domestic violence was exaggerated in records or downplayed in official archives. But the stories passed through women's bathhouses, old poetry, and whispered gossip all agree on one point: it happened. Often. And without recourse. There's a saying, a woman's voice should not rise above the shoji screen. It means stay quiet, but it also means stay small, stay soft, stay predictable. Your husband's emotions are like a typhoon, sudden, overwhelming, and best survived by lying flat and not drawing attention. And yet society paints him as the noble warrior. You're a reflection of his honor. If you step out of line, it tarnishes him. So now you not only have to survive his moods, you also have to protect his reputation while doing it. Like patching holes in a sinking ship that keeps blaming you for the water. Some days he praises you. That's worse. Because it gives you hope. Hope that things might change. But they don't. Because nothing in your world is built for your comfort. Not the rules, not the rhythms, not the rice rations. You try to keep things peaceful. You make his favorite side dish. You polish his sword stand. You wash his socks. He doesn't say thank you. That's fine. You don't expect it. What you do expect is that the wrong seasoning, the wrong phrase, the wrong glance could be seen as disrespect. And disrespect from a wife, that is shame. And shame must be corrected. Even if he doesn't hit you, there are other weapons. Silence, distance, public reprimand. He might scold you in front of servants or family. He might imply you're barren, even if the problem is him. He might take a concubine and dare you to complain. Because you won't. Because you can't. You might think, surely the law protects women from cruelty? Not really. A man could divorce a woman for disobedience, but a woman had no such right. If he beat you until you limped, your family might ask you what you did to deserve it. If you returned to your parents' home seeking shelter, they might send you back. Because a failed marriage reflects badly on them too. This isn't a story of dramatic abuse. It's quieter. It's about fear that hums beneath the surface of every interaction. It's about flinching at a raised voice, even when it's not directed at you. It's about knowing that your safety depends on the daily weather of another person's mood. There's a fringe tidbit for you. Some women in samurai households were trained in naginata, a pole weapon. Not to fight their husbands, of course. No, it was so they could defend the home if he was away. You were expected to guard the household, raise children, serve tea, and survive humiliation, all while wearing an outfit that doesn't let you run properly. And you do it. Because what choice do you have? At night, when he finally goes to sleep, you stare at the ceiling. The paper walls glow softly in the moonlight. You listen for his breathing, wait for the moment it settles into rhythm. Only then do you allow yourself to relax your shoulders. But you don't sleep easily. Because tomorrow, he might come home angry again. Tomorrow, the scolding might become a slap. Tomorrow, your name might appear in the list of women quietly sent back to their parents with a divorce scroll and no explanation. And all of it, every rule, every scar, every silence, is held together by the thin thread of something called honor. His honor, not yours. There's a splinter in your heel, but you don't stop walking. You've got the water bucket in one hand and your dignity in the other. And honestly, the bucket's heavier. Your sandals are wooden flat little planks with fabric straps called zori. And they seem specifically designed to amplify every rock root and regret under your foot. There's no arch support, no padding, just the steady reminder that even walking is an exercise in obedience. You trudge along the garden path behind the house. It's muddy after the last rain. Your toes are already soaked your kimono hem, dragging slightly, which you'll get blamed for later. Stained clothing, clearly a reflection of poor upbringing. The garden smells faintly of miso and pond algae. There's a cat somewhere, but it's not yours. You don't get pets, you get chores. Your mother-in-law greets you with a sentence that isn't quite a criticism, but somehow still feels like one. The rice yesterday was a little wet. You bow, you smile. You don't say, "It rained for 3 days and the storage roof leaks." You just nod and file it away under things I'll mutter bitterly while washing bowls. Your days revolve around domestic tasks, and every one of them comes wrapped in a double layer of judgment. You clean the house with a broom that drops more bristles than it picks up dust. You scrub dishes in cold water with a rag that smells like centuries of regret. And heaven help you if you miss a corner. Cleanliness isn't just next to godliness, it's right there next to your social worth and cooking. Oh, cooking is an art, but it's not your art. You're following someone else's recipe passed down without measurements in a tone that says do it perfectly or bring shame. The rice must be steamed just right, not too soft, not too dry. The miso soup should taste like comfort, not confusion. And don't forget the pickled vegetables. They're supposed to awaken the palate, not your anxiety. Here's a historical fact to chew on while you chop daikon. Peasants and townspeople alike had highly gendered divisions of labor. Women's work included cooking, cleaning, raising children, spinning thread, making clothes, and tending the household shrine. It wasn't just a to-do list. It was your identity. If you failed at it, you weren't just messy. You were a disgrace to your husband, your family, your ancestors, and probably the gods themselves. You go to the family altar and light incense. You bow 3 times. You don't pray for joy. You pray for endurance. Then it's time to prepare the bath water. This is done outside in a separate shed where you have to stoke a fire to heat the wooden tub. The firewood is damp. The shed smells like mildew and sacrifice. You sweat into your kimono as you tend the flames, but no one will see that part. The man of the house gets the first bath, always. After him, the elder men, then the women and children. By the time it's your turn, the water is lukewarm and cloudy, a broth of everyone else's day. And yet you're grateful, because at least it's warm. Let's not forget your feet. They never forget you, especially when they're cracked and bleeding. You soak them in salt water at night when no one's watching. You wrap them in old rags and hope the splinters don't get infected. There's no neosporin, no band-aids, no soft slippers, just straw wood and judgment. And then there's laundry. Laundry, in feudal Japan, is its own form of psychological warfare. You haul heavy buckets to the stream. You scrub kimono cloth against smooth stones. You pray the colors don't bleed, the silk doesn't tear the neighbors, don't see your underlayers, and start gossiping about your looseness. You carry the wet clothes home, arms aching, and hang them just right, never too visible, never too sloppy. All of this, while maintaining an air of grace. You're supposed to look serene while your hands are red and raw. You're supposed to smile while your back aches from carrying firewood. You're expected to whisper polite greetings while your stomach growls because you fed everyone else first and ate the leftovers, if there were any. Here's a fringe detail. Some women used ash or charcoal to brush their teeth, which sounds rustic until you realize it also sometimes doubled as cooking fuel. Multi-purpose, yes. Hygienic, debatably. The same hands that wash your face also prepare your food and clean the floor. Germ theory isn't invented yet, and even if it were, no one cares about your germs unless they inconvenience someone male. Speaking of inconvenience, your period arrives, and there's no box of sanitary pads waiting, no painkillers, no quiet day to yourself. You use rags. You hide them. You work anyway. And if you seem irritable, your in-laws whisper about your temperament. Emotional, they say. Unladylike, as if bleeding monthly and doing chores barefoot in a kimono isn't already a test of the divine. The shame is ever present. You're not supposed to complain. Complaining is dishonor. But you feel it creeping into every gesture, every chore. every time someone corrects you with a tilt of the head or a too long silence. The shame of not being fast enough, not graceful enough, not useful enough. Historians still debate whether women in lower classes had more freedom due to necessity. Some argue that peasant women who worked in the fields had more physical agency, more voice in decision-making. But that freedom came with different chains: hunger, backbreaking labor, early death. So what's your reward for enduring it all? Respect? Not really. You might earn the polite nod of an elder woman someday, or maybe a few words of praise whispered when no men are present. But mostly your reward is that no one scolds you, that you didn't shame the family, that your hands are raw, your feet cracked, and your dignity intact barely. You're expected to carry the weight of your household every day without faltering. And the tools you're given to do so: a broom, a rice paddle, and shoes that hate you. You stand in front of the mirror, if you're lucky enough to have one, adjusting the fifth, no sixth layer of your kimono. You try to get the sleeves just right. Too short, and you look improper. Too long, and someone will accuse you of trying to look younger than you are, which is apparently also bad. It's a minefield made of silk. The fabric is heavy, smooth, and completely unforgiving. You can feel the sweat forming between your shoulder blades, trapped beneath layer after layer of cultural expectation. It's summer. The air is thick. The mosquitoes are out for blood. And you're swaddled like a socially acceptable burrito. This isn't just an outfit. This is a uniform, a signal, a code. The colors, patterns, and style of your kimono tell people your marital status, your age, your class, your family's wealth, and whether or not you know how to fold laundry correctly. Even the way you tie your obi, that wide sash around your waist, says something. You're not just wearing clothes. You're wearing proof that you belong. You wonder briefly what it might be like to wear pants. Just once. Something that doesn't require an assistant, a mirror, and a spiritual commitment. But no. Pants are for men, monks, and scandal. You shift your weight and feel the layers constrict. You can't raise your arms above your head without dislodging the whole thing. You can't run, not that you're supposed to. Running is undignified. You are not meant to move fast. You are meant to glide, even if it's 36 degrees Celsius and the nearest fan is made of paper. Let's talk about movement. Sitting is an event. You must kneel properly with your knees folded beneath you in the Caesar position for extended periods. On a floor that offers as much support as a particularly judgmental pancake. Your legs go numb. Your back aches, but you stay still. Because shifting too much is rude. And pain is just a symptom of propriety. And if you're ever allowed to walk outside the home, you don't get to stroll. You shuffle. Small steps. Delicate, controlled, dignified. Remember, your footwear is wooden. Elevated. It makes a satisfying click on stone paths, which would be fun if it didn't also remind you that you're one rolled ankle away from being an embarrassment to your ancestors. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. The more formal the occasion, the more layers you wore. Aristocratic women sometimes had up to 12 layers junihito. They were so heavy that women needed attendants to help them move. But even commoners had to follow complex seasonal dressing codes. Certain motifs were only acceptable during certain months. Chrysanthemums in September. Plum blossoms in February. If you wore the wrong flower at the wrong time, someone would notice. Someone always notices. Historians still argue whether these aesthetic codes empowered women through artistic expression, or simply box them in with unrelenting rules. Either way, you weren't choosing your wardrobe based on comfort. You were choosing based on survival. And then there's undressing. You think taking it all off would be faster than putting it on. Think again. There are ties, sashes, inner cords, clips if you're rich, knots if you're not. It's like solving a fabric puzzle blindfolded while someone judges you silently in the background. Undressing takes just as long as dressing, and if you need help, good luck. It's supposed to be private, modest, efficient. So yes, your kimono is beautiful. That's the point. It makes you a walking canvas. People admire it, compliment it. They say you look like a noble lady or a willow tree in bloom, but no one ever asks how it feels. The answer is stiff, sweaty, and like a corset made of expectations. And speaking of that, Obi, let's talk practicality. The thing wraps around your middle and pulls tight, really tight. It doesn't breathe. You eat too much rice. It notices. You have cramps. Too bad. You try to sit sideways. The Obi says no. Some women fainted. Quietly, of course, with poise. Then got up, brushed it off, and apologized for the inconvenience. You're told it's elegant. Graceful. A woman's duty to uphold the aesthetic balance of the household. You think about that while adjusting the fold that keeps riding up because your ribs need space and the fabric disagrees. What's worse is that the fabric is expensive, which means you don't own many of them. Maybe 2 for work. 1 for formal events. If your family is wealthy, maybe you have 6. You don't get to pick them freely. They're passed down repurposed or gifted based on status and favor. If one gets stained, you scrub it clean until your knuckles ache. If one tears, you mend it by hand with thread so fine it's practically invisible. If you're poor, you wear hand-me-downs with old family crests, still on them symbols of people you don't even remember stitched into your daily life. And if you're pregnant, oh, well, that's an entirely new game. You still wear the kimono. Only now it's tighter. It's wrapped differently to support the womb. No maternity wear here. Just extra cloth and an expectation that you won't complain even as your ankles swell and your belly pushes against the rice-stiff fabric. You don't get to lounge in softness. You endure in silence. Even sleeping isn't easy. You sleep in your under kimono. You fold your daytime layers carefully and place them near your futon, neatly, always neatly. If there's a fire, you may only have seconds to grab one layer and flee, but don't make a fuss. If you die without your Obi, people will talk. So every morning, every outing, every meal, you wear your cage. Your silk and cotton needle-threaded, exquisitely crafted cage. And you smile, because beauty is obligation. An obligation doesn't wrinkle. You feel it first as a dull cramp low and steady, then another sharper just under your ribs. You pause while folding towels, rough sun-dried cloths that scratch your hands, but the pain doesn't. You breathe through it, one hand on the small of your back. The baby's moving. That's good, probably. Maybe. It hurts. But at least it means you're still pregnant. In feudal Japan, pregnancy is a strange blend of celebration and terror. On the surface, your swelling belly is a symbol of family success. But beneath that, beneath the layers of silk and restraint, is you. Scared, exhausted, uncomfortable in a body that is no longer fully yours. No one asks how you're feeling. They ask when. When will the baby come? When will it be a boy? When will you stop moving so slowly and get back to work? Because pregnancy is not a pause. It's an addition. You're still cooking, cleaning, bowing, scrubbing, and doing it all with an extra 10 kilograms of pressure on your spine. There are no prenatal vitamins, no ultrasounds, no doctor visits unless you're rich. And even then, it's more ritual than science. You might get a charm from a local shrine tied to your obi for protection. You might get advice from older women, some helpful, some terrifying. Don't sleep facing north, one says. Avoid squid, or the baby will have droopy eyes, says another. Never eat cold food after sunset. You nod. You obey. Not because you believe all of it, but because superstition is the only prenatal care available. A historical fact, childbirth in feudal Japan was handled mostly by Sanba traditional midwives. These women learned from experience, not textbooks. They used herbs' pressure points and a healthy dose of let's hope this works. Mortality rates were high. For mothers. For babies. For both. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. A woman bled out in the bath. Another gave birth standing because there was no room to lie down. Some never woke up, and yet you carry on. Because stopping isn't an option. You kneel. You cook. You serve tea with a hand on your belly and a prayer under your breath. When labor starts, it doesn't start with ceremony. There's no hospital rush, no suitcase packed. You simply stop what you're doing, often mid-task, and wait for someone to notice. You're taken to the smallest, cleanest room. A mat is spread. Towels are warmed. The samba arrives, and maybe another woman or two, depending on your social standing. Your husband, not there. Men don't attend births. It's women's business, even when it's your body breaking open to produce his heir. You're expected to be quiet, stoic. Screaming is vulgar. You bite down on a cloth. You grip the tatami edge until your nails split. The pain comes in waves that drown your thoughts. You push and wonder if this is the last thing you'll ever do. Historians still argue how much agency women had in childbirth rituals. Some records suggest certain clans had empowering ceremonies. Others point to near total isolation. But nearly all agree the risk was immense, and women often faced it alone. The baby arrives, maybe crying, maybe silent. Either way, you're exhausted, bleeding, shaking, and immediately handed the next task: feed it. There's no rest, no swaddling and adoration. If it's a boy, the room brightens a little. If it's a girl, there's a pause, a slight sigh. Not cruel, just resigned. You've done your job. And now you start another. You wrap the baby in cloth that's been passed down through generations. You nurse it. You burp it. You hold it upright with trembling arms. The samba offers a broth that tastes like boiled grass and warm stone. It's meant to restore your strength. It doesn't. The days that follow blur together. You don't have time for postpartum depression because the term doesn't exist. You're expected to bounce back, emotionally, physically, socially. Within days, you're back to cleaning, bowing and smiling through the aches. Your breasts hurt. Your joints ache. You haven't slept more than 2 hours in a row. But the laundry still needs doing. And if, gods forbid, the baby doesn't survive, the grief is quiet, stoic. You bury it in silence. There are no grief counselors, no public mourning. Maybe a small offering at the household shrine, a flower, a folded poem. You cry alone when the house is asleep, and no one can hear you shame yourself with sorrow. But if the baby lives, you love it, fiercely, quietly. The kind of love that makes you wake up early to check its breath, that makes you sing lullabies made of superstition and longing. You trace its little fingers and try not to imagine the world it will inherit. If it's a girl, you pray for gentleness. If it's a boy, you prepare him for swords. And all the while you heal, slowly, privately, with no one asking how you're doing, because this is what you were made for. Apparently. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some communities held baby naming rituals where the name was whispered into the child's ear by a priest or family elder believed to bind the name to the soul. You weren't the one who chose it. You just carried the soul here. So you continue sleep-deprived, aching but alive. And in this world, that's the best anyone can hope for. You are a mother now, a vessel fulfilled, a woman who just survived the riskiest part of being alive. Barely. You're wiping rice off the baby's chin when you hear the name Geisha. The visiting merchant says it with a kind of reverence, like it's a mythical creature, not a living woman. His wife frowns, but stays silent. You keep your eyes lowered and your expression neutral the way you've practiced. But your mind, it runs wild. You've heard the stories about the beautiful women who live in special districts, who wear extravagant kimonos and walk like poetry, who sing, dance, play the shamisen, and pour tea with fingers like silk, and most importantly, who speak freely, laugh openly, make men listen. It sounds like power, or at least the illusion of it, but you also know the reality is far from romantic. Becoming a geisha is not a backup plan. It's a career path you don't choose, so much as get funneled into, especially if you're poor, orphaned, or just inconveniently female. If your family can't support you, if you're seen as unmarriageable, or if your beauty is seen as marketable, you might be sold or apprenticed to an okiya, a geisha house. There you live with strict rules under the roof of a woman who once was you. The Okasan, or mother, trains you, disciplines you, invests in you, and owns you. Every lesson in dance music, etiquette, and poetry is a debt. And debt isn't optional. You repay it through years of work performance and obedience. Here's a historical fact. Geisha began to appear in the 17th century first, as male entertainers. It wasn't until later that the term became exclusively associated with women. And even then, the role was complex, entertainer-artist, conversationalist. But never officially a sex worker. That was a separate and often confused profession. Still, the lines were blurry, especially for Maiko apprentice geisha. While geisha were trained in the refined arts, their survival depended on their patrons, wealthy men. Men who paid for their time, their presence, their performance, and sometimes more. Historians still argue whether geisha were empowered women in a patriarchal society, or simply another layer of ornamental subjugation. What's clear is this: they lived within rules just as rigid as yours. They just looked prettier while doing it. Imagine the day begins in an okiya. You're 13, maybe 14. You've been renamed. Your hair is restyled into a rigid top knot that takes hours and smells faintly of scorched pine. You're dressed in a red under kimono and a trailing outer layer that signals your trainee status. Your obi is tied long in the back, a clear sign to everyone that you're in training, not yet professional. The weight of the fabric alone is a reminder this is not childhood anymore. You attend lessons, dance in the morning, shamisen in the afternoon, conversation practice in the evening. You're taught how to laugh without showing teeth, how to refill a cup without looking directly at the guest, how to speak just enough to intrigue, but never enough to offend. And it's exhausting. You serve tea in rooms filled with incense men and smoke. You smile. You listen. You compliment. Your own thoughts are carefully edited, sculpted into palatable lines. You become the ideal listener, the flattering companion. the evening's decoration. And when the men leave you, sweep up the silence behind them. Some geisha rise. They gain powerful patrons, secure financial independence, even retire and open their own okiya. But many don't. Many work for decades to pay off debt aging out of demand and into quiet obscurity. If they marry, they must retire. If they fall ill, they're easily replaced. It's not all art and elegance. It's performance. Constant performance. And beneath the powder and poise is a body that still aches feet, that still blister, and a voice that still belongs more to others than to yourself. You think about that as you wipe down the dinner tray. Being a geisha might sound like freedom compared to your life, but only if you haven't looked closely. They wear silk cages too, just brighter ones. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some geisha train themselves to sleep with their necks elevated on small wooden blocks, so their elaborate hairstyles would last several days. Beauty as inconvenience. Endurance disguised as luxury. You think about the cracked skin on your own hands, the plainness of your robe, the endless repetition of domestic labor. And for a moment, you wonder, would you trade places to have your voice heard but scripted, to move freely but only within a tea house, to be admired but owned? It's a tempting fantasy. But in reality, you know both paths are paved with silence, just different kinds. So you fold the napkin, wash the bowls, and whisper a quiet private song to yourself, not for an audience, not for a client, just for you. The merchant's wife enters the room with a smile frozen halfway to polite. You bow. She bows. You kneel to serve the tea, careful not to meet her gaze too long. That could be read as insolence. Not enough in its disinterest. You're walking a tightrope stitched from rice paper and courtesy. You pour the tea. Steam rises. The porcelain clinks against the tray, just slightly, not too loud, not too soft. Every motion is practiced, choreographed, expected. You hand her the cup with two hands, fingers slightly turned inward to hide your nails. She doesn't thank you. She doesn't need to. You don't expect it, because you're a woman. And in feudal Japan, that means your job is to float through life like mist. Seen, but barely. Heard, but only in soft, murmuring tones. Conversation is dangerous. Not in the obvious way, but in the small ways. If you speak too much, you're annoying. If you speak too little, you're cold. You're not allowed to be clever unless it flatters someone. You can't disagree even if they're wrong, especially if they're wrong. And heaven forbid you laugh too loudly. Laughter is supposed to be delicate. A fan in front of your mouth. A polite tilt of the head. If you sound like you're enjoying yourself too much, it could be considered indecent. Joy in women must be carefully rationed. So you learn to edit. To speak in soft observations. To ask questions that make other people feel smart. You speak around your opinions, never through them. You become fluent in implication, praise by omission, disapproval by silence. Here's a historical fact that won't surprise you. Girls were taught from a young age that obedience and humility were the highest virtues. Education, if it came at all, was focused on etiquette, sewing calligraphy, and sometimes a little poetry. Nothing that would make you too opinionated, too aware. Certainly nothing that might tempt you to challenge your husband or confuse your sons. Historians still argue whether some upper-class women found ways to wield influence through salon-like gatherings, subtle advice, or their role as mothers. But the daily reality for most was this: speak carefully, listen constantly, disappear gracefully. It becomes a habit, a second language. You know how to fill silence with agreeable nods, how to offer a compliment without sounding competitive. You know that tone matters more than truth, that your expression must remain neutral, even when the conversation stings. Your husband speaks over you during meals. Not cruelly, just as a matter of course. You're not expected to have insights into political matters or even practical ones. If you speak out of turn, your father-in-law clears his throat. Just once. That's enough. A fringe tidbit for you: in some regions, girls were taught a concept called enryo restraint, or holding back. Not just in speech, but in body language appetite, even facial expression. It was a badge of refinement to seem invisible. The less you expressed, the more you were praised. So you smile. You keep your mouth small, your hands folded, your posture polite. You thank others often. You apologize constantly. And yet you still find ways to rebel. Quietly. Maybe you whisper gossip with the neighbor's daughter while hanging laundry. Maybe you sing a song with silly lyrics while scrubbing the floor just loud enough to hear yourself. Maybe you write haiku that no one else reads, folded into your sleeves like secret declarations. There's a part of you that aches to be heard. Not just noticed, but heard. To speak freely, even clumsily. To say what you think about the rice tax, or the new magistrate, or the weather, without turning every sentence into an apology. But instead, you teach your daughter the same things you were taught. How to speak softly, how to never interrupt, how to be agreeable without giving yourself away. Because that's survival. And if you do make a mistake, if you speak too freely in the presence of a guest, there's no public outburst. Just a long silence. Maybe a scolding in private. Maybe not even that. Just a lingering look. A reminder. You can have thoughts, but you shouldn't share them. You can have a voice, but only if it knows how to whisper. You crouch by the family altar just before dawn, eyes fluttering against sleep. The incense is already lit, its bittersweet spiral curling toward the ceiling. You press your hands together in a bow, not for show, not because anyone's watching, just because it's the rhythm of the day. Bow, offer, whisper a prayer you barely remember learning. Not for wealth, not for freedom, for stability, for quiet, for another day without incident. Religion in feudal Japan is less about belief and more about order. You aren't converting or evangelizing or picking teams. You're coexisting with spirits, with obligations, with old rules etched into paper scrolls and cedar. Shinto and Buddhism flow through the household like the scent of miso, always present, sometimes overwhelming, rarely questioned. They're not paths you choose. They're walls you live within. Your spiritual world is domestic. You maintain the kamidana, the household Shinto altar, tucked into a clean corner of the home. It's simple, a wooden shelf with a tiny torii gate, a paper talisman from the local shrine, maybe a bowl of rice and salt. You change the offerings daily, always fresh, always clean. Spirits are picky. Dirty offerings are bad luck, and bad luck in your world is personal. You also tend the Butsudan, the Buddhist family shrine where ancestors reside. Their names are inked onto slender wooden tablets. You bow to them, offer food, ask for protection, or at least forgiveness. You don't question if they're listening. Questioning would be inappropriate. Your job is to remember, to honor, to serve the dead so the living can remain undisturbed. A historical fact here: during the Edo period, the Tokugawa shogunate enforced affiliation with Buddhist temples as a means of controlling the population and suppressing Christianity. Every household had to register with a temple. Buddhism was a tool of social order as much as spiritual belief. Temples tracked families' births, deaths. In other words, your religion also worked as the government's early surveillance system. But for you, it's smaller than that. It's the rhythm of your hands as you polish the lacquered altar doors. It's the crackle of the matchstick as you light the candle. It's the scent of sandalwood that clings to your sleeves. Religion also governs your calendar. Festivals, purification, rituals, seasonal offerings all timed to the moon, the harvest, the local shrine schedule. Some are joyful, others are solemn. Most are simply required. You participate without question. You wear your best kimono, carry the offering basket, and bow in unison with every other woman in your neighborhood. Harmony is everything. But it's not just what you do, it's what you don't. You don't touch sacred objects during your period. You don't point chopsticks at the altar. You don't whistle at night. It's said to attract snakes and bad spirits. Superstition is stitched into your daily habits, like embroidery, even if you don't believe every rule you follow it. Because not doing so isn't brave, it's dangerous. Here's a fringe detail. Some women believed that sneezing while cooking rice was a sign of impending illness. Others thought you could change the gender of an unborn child by sleeping with your head pointing north. Some beliefs were ancient. Others just felt old because no one ever challenged them. You live among spirits, not just the dead, but the unseen forces in rivers, trees, even kitchen tools. A broken comb isn't trash. It's an object to be thanked and discarded respectfully. You wrap it in paper, say a word of thanks, and set it aside to be burned during the proper ceremony. Because the comb served you. Because even tools deserve closure. You teach your daughter the same things. How to bow to a Jizo statue on the roadside. How to clap twice before making a wish at the shrine. How to walk under a torii gate properly, never through the center. The center is for the gods. We keep to the sides. But it's not all incense and reverence. Religion also enforces your place. Temples remind you to be obedient, to show gratitude through silence, to see suffering as part of your karma, your station, your womanhood. If your husband is cruel, the priest may tell you to reflect inward, to meditate, to correct your own heart. Historians still argue whether temples offered women any genuine refuge or merely spiritualized their oppression. There are stories of female pilgrims, female monks, even nuns. But for most women, religion was another set of folded instructions, another box to fit inside. You don't resent it. Not exactly. There's comfort in repetition, in ritual, in knowing your place in a cosmic order. But some nights, after everyone's asleep, you light a second candle. Not for the ancestors, not for the gods, for yourself. No bow, no prayer, just a small flame in the dark, a rebellion as quiet as ash. And in that flicker, you remember your soul too is sacred, even if no one says it aloud. You sit cross-legged in the dirt hands, stained with the dark blush of pickled plums, the sour scent clinging to your sleeves. It's time for food prep again. It's always food prep. Peeling, fermenting, slicing, pounding, steaming. You'd think you were preparing for a royal banquet with how much effort it takes to feed 5 people 2 meals a day. But no, this is just lunch. Your kitchen is more a corner of the house than a room of its own. It has a hearth, a big clay stove called a kamado, and a small shelf that you jealously guard like a dragon's hoard. On it, your miso, your dried sardines, your 2 jars of pickles, and a small, suspiciously moldy block of tofu you're pretending not to notice. There's a bamboo ladle, a mortar and pestle for sesame seeds, and a knife that's sharp only because you sharpen it yourself using a river stone and every last bit of patience in your body. Food isn't just nourishment, it's reputation. Rice that's too wet sloppy, soup that's too salty, careless, overcooked vegetables, disgraceful, and it's all on you. Every bite your family takes is a silent review of your worth as a wife. Today's meal is rice, of course, plus a miso soup made from yesterday's stock, 1 grilled sardine split between 2 people, and pickled radish. You chew slowly, savoring it despite yourself. It's not luxurious, but it's edible. Filling even. That's a win. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The feudal Japanese diet was primarily vegetarian for both religious and practical reasons. Meat was technically frowned upon under Buddhist influence, though it didn't stop people from occasionally eating wild boarfish or whatever else they could catch and not get judged for. But for the average woman, rice, root vegetables, seaweed, and fermented soy were your holy quartet. You eat last. Of course you do. You serve the elders first, then your husband, then your children. By the time you sit down, the food's lukewarm and the rice is a little crusty, but you don't complain. Not because you're noble, because it would change nothing. You sip your tea more like warm water that sat next to a tea leaf once and think about dinner. You'll need to soak the rice by mid-afternoon. Wash the sweet potatoes. Check the miso paste for worms. Yes, worms. You just scoop them out and keep going. Protein. Write a fringe tidbit some women grew and dried their own kombu seaweed used for flavoring, then hid the best cuts for special occasions. Not to hoard, just to survive surprise visits, in-laws, or sudden expectations of hospitality. And let's not forget the firewood. You chop it. You stack it. You curse it when it's damp. If the fire doesn't catch you, don't cook. And if you don't cook, the house doesn't eat. And if the house doesn't eat well, no one blames the firewood. They blame you. There's also water to fetch. You walk to the stream, with buckets balanced on a bamboo pole across your back, feeling every ripple of weight with each step. The path is muddy. Your feet slip. Your arms ache. You get home soaked and sore, only to boil the water for washing dishes. You scrub with sand or ashes. Your hands crack. The soap you made last month is running low, and the new batch isn't ready yet. You hope no one notices. Your husband never thanks you for meals. Your children sometimes do, but usually not. You're invisible until something's wrong. Then suddenly everyone's very aware of your presence. The soup's bland. You hear about it. The radish is too soft. You hear about it. The fish has bones. Somehow still your fault. And yet there's pride here. Tiny stubborn pride. When the rice steams just right. When the dashi has that perfect umami. When the pickles crunch. No one praises you, but they eat in silence. And silence in your world is the highest compliment. Historians still argue whether the constant domestic workload gave women a kind of grassroots power. After all, they controlled the meals, the household budget, the daily logistics of survival. But power without recognition is just responsibility. And you're drowning in it. You keep a tiny stash of dried fruit hidden behind the clay jars. Not because it's forbidden, but because it's yours. Just a few plum slices, a half-dried persimmon. When the house is quiet, you sneak one. It's tart sweet and tastes like freedom. For 6 seconds, you teach your daughter how to peel burdock root, how to wash rice until the water runs clear, how to dry daikon in the sun just right. She asks why it matters. You want to say, because no one else will care if you don't. But instead, you say, because that's how it's done. And she nods already, learning to swallow questions. By evening, your sleeves smell like smoke and soy. Your back is bent. Your hands are rough. But the family is fed. The bowls are clean. The fire's out. And you've survived another day in the kitchen. You feel it in your bones before the first leaf even turns. Autumn creeps in with a cool breeze and the scent of drying rice fields. The days grow shorter. The air sharpens. And you begin the ritual of preparing for winter, a season not of snowflakes and cozy fires, but of bone-deep chill rationing and quiet desperation. Winter in feudal Japan doesn't arrive gently. There's no central heating, no thick glass windows, no fleece-lined slippers. Your home is made of wood and paper. Beautiful, yes. Insulating, absolutely not. The cold seeps through the floorboards, around the edges of every screen door, into your sleeves and under your collar. There's no escaping it, only outlasting it. You start early. You mend old quilts with patches from even older ones. You double the straw mats under your bedding. You stuff wadded paper into the gaps in the shoji screens, hoping the wind won't be too cruel this year. You pickle more vegetables, dry, more herbs, press more miso into jars that will sit like squat, hopeful promises through the frozen months. A mainstream historical fact, Japanese homes of the Edo period were notoriously drafty. Most families used hibachi charcoal braziers, or small hearths for warmth, but these produced more smoke than heat. And since chimneys weren't common, you kept the fire low or lived in smoke. Your choice. You spend evenings huddled around the hearth, hands outstretched sleeves, catching stray ash. Your children crowd close. You pull the blankets tighter. Your husband might say little, but he expects warmth. Not affection, literal warmth. You're expected to be the keeper of comfort even when you're freezing too. During the coldest months, your feet go numb before sunrise. You walk like a ghost, careful not to wake the household. You slip into the shed to fetch kindling blow softly on last night's embers, coaxing life from charcoal dust. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. When it fails, you curse under your breath and begin again. Quietly. Always quietly. You wear every layer you own. 2 under kimono, a lined outer robe and apron. And still you shiver. There's no such thing as warm enough, only cold, but tolerable. You tie a scarf around your ears and rub your hands together until they sting. You avoid using too much water. It freezes in the basin overnight. You crack ice off the bucket like you're mining for drinkable gold. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some women stitch tiny dried beans into the hems of their sleeves, not for superstition, but to create just enough weight to keep the wind from blowing the fabric open while working. Small hacks for small comforts. Historians still argue how widespread certain winter coping mechanisms were. Some claim rural women had more resilience, more firewood, more space. Others suggest urban women face sharper cold due to cramped quarters and limited supplies. But cold is cold. No class makes frostbite poetic. You also plan meals more carefully. Warmth starts in the stomach. You boil root vegetables, stretch miso as far as it can go, and save fatty scraps for broth. On good days, you have rice porridge thickened with barley. On lean days, just hot water with pickled plum. You tell your children it's a treat. They believe you this year. Sleep is a complicated dance. You share the futon with your youngest, their breath a small blessing in the chill. You curl up tight knees, tucked hands between thighs back to the outer wall. You pray your husband doesn't complain about the draft or the thinness of the blanket. You repaired it 3 times already. And then there's illness. Colds become chest infections. A sore throat becomes a lingering cough. There are no antibiotics, no real medicine. Just warm tea, honey, if you have it, ginger if you're lucky, and rest, which you never get. If someone gets sick, you become nurse. And if you get sick, you become invisible. No one picks up your chores. They just pile up. And if you rest too long, people start to whisper, "She's weak, she's lazy, she's cursed." You hide your fever and keep working. Because what else is there? You teach your daughter how to walk fast without slipping, how to boil water 3 times, so it's safe, how to recognize frostbite before it's too late. You teach her how to braid old straw into slippers. They won't last. Nothing does in this season, but they're better than nothing. A neighbor dies, quietly. An old woman who ran out of firewood, or maybe rice, or just strength. You help prepare the body, wash her hands, fold her robe, place a small coin near her mouth for the journey. You say nothing, but inside, you think, "I hope someone does this for me when my time comes." You endure. Every single day. You smile when the sun returns, even for an hour. You sit near the paper window, just to feel it on your face. You ration tea leaves. You mend socks with hair-thin thread. You survive because that's what women do. In the winter, they keep surviving. And when spring finally shows its face, just a crocus abud, a single drip of thawed ice, you allow yourself one real smile. Not because it's over, but because you proved you could last. The snow has melted. The wind has softened. But you don't trust it, not yet. Spring in feudal Japan is beautiful, yes, but also deceptive. It lures you out with cherry blossoms and then slaps you back inside with a surprise frost. So you move cautiously. You peel back one layer of clothing, not all. You open one shoji screen, not 2. You begin the spring cleaning. And it's not like the modern kind with playlists and scented candles. No, this is a full-body purge. You scrub soot off rafters. You beat the dust from tatami mats until your arms go numb. You air out the futon until your knuckles swell from carrying them up to the roof. You stir the pickling jars, clean out the ash pit, and rethread every sandal strap. Spring is rebirth. For nature, for men, for the household. For you, it's just more work. Your husband, like clockwork, begins to speak of planting. Even if you're not a peasant, you still have a family garden, a plot where daikon leeks burdock root and maybe some millet grow. He talks of soil like it's poetry. He gets nostalgic. He quotes farming proverbs like he invented them. Meanwhile, you're the one hauling compost, breaking earth, carrying water seed basket hoe. You wash his hands when he's done gardening, but no one washes yours. A mainstream historical fact. Spring festivals, Harumatsuri, were important in the agricultural calendar. Shinto shrines held ceremonies to bless the fields, pray for good harvests, and drive out evil spirits. But while men led the rituals, women did the preparations, cooking, cleaning, arranging offerings, even composing the songs. No part of the celebration happened without you, but you were often background to the blessing. You kneel at the shrine, as always, this time with rice cakes and citrus. You light the incense clap, twice bow deeply. Your daughter mimics you beside the shrine. Her bow's a little crooked, her sleeves too long, but she's trying. You smile without letting her see. Spring is when expectations reset. New marriage arrangements, new roles. Your niece is being sent to a merchant family to be trained as a servant. She's 11. She cried when she left. You didn't cry, but your heart twisted like a wet rag. You remember that feeling too well, packing your things, bowing too many times, stepping into a house that would never fully be yours. Spring is also when old debts are collected. The merchant your husband borrowed rice from last fall. He's here, sitting in the house sipping your tea, pretending to be polite. You offer him a rice cracker. He accepts, but his eyes scan the room, measuring how well you've kept it. Every inch of your floor is a report card. There's a fringe tradition in some towns, Susuharai, or soot sweeping day. Families clear out soot and dust accumulated over the year. Symbolic cleansing. You sweep the ashes into a bundle and toss it outside. But the smoke never really leaves. It just hides in the grain of the wood. Historians still debate whether seasonal change brought women any kind of psychological reprieve. Some argue that the lighter clothing and festival energy lifted spirits. Others point to the way chores only shifted shape, never lightened. A change in season didn't mean rest. It meant reorganization. Your workload changes. Now you're fermenting bamboo shoots, drying young greens, weaving new straw sandals. You patch the children's sleeves, measuring their growth against old stitching. Your son has outgrown his robe. You let down the hem while mentally counting the days until he'll no longer fit in your lap. You walk to the stream and notice frogs again. Tiny, green, loud. Their chirps echo across the water. You pause. You let yourself watch them for 5 seconds longer than necessary. You imagine what it would be like to sit there all day. Just sit. But then the water bucket tips, and it's back to work. And the cherry blossoms. Of course, the blossoms. You watch them fall like soft rain. You sweep them from the porch each morning, even though more will arrive by noon. Your children try to catch them in their sleeves. Your husband grumbles about petals in his tea. But you pluck one. Just one. You tuck it behind your daughter's ear. She beams. Later alone, you press another blossom between the pages of your old prayer book. No one will see it. It won't change your life. But it's yours. A piece of spring you claim quietly. The winds carry scents of plum wine, wet dirt, fried rice cakes, and hope. And though you never say it aloud, spring reminds you things change. Slowly, silently, but they do. Even you. Your husband's voice cuts through the still morning like a bamboo reed through water. He's talking about taxes. Again, not the kind you pay in coin, because who even has coin but in rice cloth, firewood, and sweat? Mostly yours. The magistrate's collector is coming next week. You know what that means, an entire household effort to appear more compliant than you actually are. You scrub the entrance path. You air out the best bedding. You take down the drying clothes early so no one thinks you're behind on laundry. Appearance, after all, is half the law. Feudal taxes are not just numbers. They are rituals of power. The daimyo gets rice. The tax collector gets deference. Your husband gets stressed, and you get silent. Because women don't speak during these transactions. Not unless spoken to. You bow. You serve tea. You blend into the tatami like you were woven into it, a historical fact to keep in mind under the Tokugawa shogunate. The majority of peasants paid their taxes in rice measured in koku, roughly the amount one person needed to survive for a year. For a household like yours, that might mean giving up a full third of what you've managed to grow, store, and not eat yet. Ouch! Even merchant households were subject to levies, sometimes in the form of guild fees, sometimes as voluntary contributions. Voluntary in name only, of course. Declining to contribute could bring scrutiny fines, or worse. So you prepare. You gather your best rice sacks. You check for worms. You pat them down with damp cloths so they look full. You restitch any loose seams. You polish the lid of the wooden chest where the tax rice will be displayed. Your husband doesn't ask you to do these things, but he notices when you don't. There's also the side tax, the unspoken one. Gifts, bribes, a little bundle of pickled plums, a finely sewn cloth, tea leaves from your cousin's village. These aren't required, but they're expected. You make them. You wrap them. You present them with both hands and eyes lowered. If the magistrate's man is in a good mood, he nods and leaves. If not, he finds a problem. A miscounted bundle. A sack not full enough. A cloth with a frayed edge. He notes it in his ledger. You'll pay for it later. Maybe not in rice, but in reputation. A fringe tidbit. In some regions, women would secretly dilute the rice given to collectors by mixing in dried beans or husks cleverly disguised at the bottom of the sack. It was risky. If caught, the shame alone could ruin your family. But desperate times, as they say. Historians still argue how much say women had in managing household taxes. Some accounts suggest wives kept meticulous ledgers, handled bartering, and negotiated small trades. Others portray them strictly as silent partners. The truth is probably in the middle. You don't speak during tax day, but you prepare for it every day. After the collector leaves, the air is lighter, but only slightly. Your husband paces less. Your children stop pretending not to be afraid. You pour yourself a bowl of barley tea and finally sit for exactly 6 minutes. Then your daughter spills the ink pot and the world continues. Your husband thanks the gods. You thank your own planning. Taxes paid. For now. You think about how this whole system works, how the food you grow, the clothes you make, the roof you mend, the firewood you chop, all of it can be counted and claimed. But you can't. You aren't taxed. You aren't even noticed. You're the invisible force that keeps the whole structure from collapsing. But you'll never be in the ledger. You'll never be written down. Still, you rise. The next morning, you're out, before the sun, helping replant radishes. Your hands are cracked, your shoulders tight, but the rice sacks are lighter now, and your chest feels a little less so. You survived tax season. Again, it's barely dawn, and already you're smoothing down your sleeves, pinning stray hairs behind your ears, and bracing yourself for visitors. Your husband's sister is arriving today with her 3 children and her sharp tongue. Officially, it's a family visit. Unofficially, it's a test. She enters like she owns the floor. You bow. She bows lower, just enough to be slightly superior. Her children scatter, leaving muddy footprints and loud requests for snacks. She says nothing, just adjusts her hairpin and sighs a sound so full of judgment it might as well be a sermon. This is what female relationships look like in your world, layered, politicized, necessary. You need each other, but you're also trained to compete quietly, of course. No shouting, just the occasional passive-aggressive compliment. Oh, your daughter is walking already. Mine waited until she was steady. So cautious, smile. Nod. Sip tea. Repeat. You play the game. You pour tea into cups so thin they tremble in your hands. You serve rice cakes, shaped like chrysanthemums, even though they took 3 hours and a tiny burn. You offer the good pickles, the new tatami cushions, the shade-facing seat. You do everything right. And still, she finds something. These radishes are a little soft, she notes, picking one up delicately with chopsticks. But perhaps the soil here is just different. Another smile. Another barb. You nod. You apologize. You thank her for her wisdom. Inside, your teeth grind. Here's a historical fact. In Edo period Japan, a woman's social capital was tightly linked to her ability to maintain and navigate family ties, especially with in-laws. Marriages weren't just unions between people. They were contracts between households. You didn't just marry a man, you married his mother, his sister, his ancestors, your own family. Slowly, they become strangers. You're not expected to visit often. Letters are rare and scrutinized. Your loyalty is to your husband's home now. And so your social circle becomes a loop. Neighbors, in-laws, shrine matrons, the merchant's wife across the alley. You see them weekly. You exchange news. But it's not friendship exactly. It's diplomacy. A fringe tidbit, women in some towns would exchange coded poems during festivals light verse with double meanings, commenting on marriage family, or even local gossip. It was one of the few ways to speak honestly, without speaking openly. You keep one such poem folded into the lining of your sleeve. A gift from a girl you once laughed with before she married and disappeared into another house. Historians still argue whether these female networks were oppressive or empowering. Were women isolated, or did they create their own sub-society within the rigid walls? Likely both. You're part of a sisterhood stitched with politeness and paper fans. It's soft but sharp, beautiful but exhausting. Your daughter watches everything. She sees how you bow, how you serve, how you navigate questions like, how much rice do you cook each day? Or are your pickles made with local vinegar, harmless on the surface but loaded underneath? She watches and she learns. Later you pull her aside. You whisper, always serve the tea, but never forget who drinks it. She nods, though she's not old enough to understand the full weight of that yet. When your sister-in-law finally leaves, the silence is sacred. You sit for a moment, ankles throbbing, hands still curled from carrying trays. You notice the smudge on the floor where the children played. You don't clean it yet. You let it sit just for a few breaths. This is the hidden world of women. 1,000 rituals. 1,000,000 unsaid words. You're not just managing a household. You're balancing pride, reputation, expectations, all while stirring the soup and checking the firewood. You do it well. You must. Because if you fail, it's not just your failure. It reflects on your husband, your in-laws, your ancestors. But for now, no one complained about the tea. The rice was warm. The radish was only slightly soft. You won. This round anyway. It starts with a cough. Not yours, your son's. Dry at first, then persistent, then wet. You press your hand to his forehead. Warm. Too warm. You don't panic yet. Children get sick. It's normal. You mix rice gruel. You brew weak tea. You tuck him close and wait. But the cough worsens. His eyes dim. His breaths become shallow little gasps, like he's sipping air through a reed. Now you worry. Illness in your world is more than just physical. It's personal. A reflection people whisper of imbalance, neglect, even impurity. They don't blame the wind or the dust or the neighbor's sneezing toddler. They might blame you. Quietly. With tilted glances and tightened lips. Maybe she let him play near the river. Perhaps she didn't change his bedding often enough. Is her household clean? You send for the healer, not a doctor, because those are rare and expensive. Just the local Yamauba, a woman who knows herbs heat and the boundaries between this world and the next. She arrives with a sack of dried things that smell like bitter tea and tree bark. She places her ear to your son's chest. She frowns. She mixes a poultice. She murmurs a chant. She tells you to boil ginger and rub his feet with garlic. You do everything, anything. You stay awake all night wiping his brow with a damp cloth that never stays cool long enough. You whisper prayers you half remember. You bargain with gods you've never spoken to before. A mainstream historical fact. Edo Japan had a blend of folk remedies, Chinese medicine, and early Western influence through Dutch texts. But access depended on class and connections. For the average family, healing was home-based and filled with trial and error. And most errors were permanent. Your daughter begins to sniffle. You feel a quiet panic rise in your throat, but you push it down. You can't afford fear. Not now. You increase the vinegar in the soup. You burn incense near the bedding. You wash every cloth in scalding water, even as your knuckles crack from the heat. You sleep in half breaths. You dream of your son coughing, then of him not coughing at all. The healer returns. She checks his pulse. She nods slowly. He's strong, she says. But watch the next 3 days. You nod too, though your spine aches and your eyelids tremble from exhaustion. You're so tired you feel hollow, like your body is a kettle long since boiled dry. Here's a fringe detail. Some households tied tiny charms made of rice paper and string around sick children's wrists, symbols of protection. You tie one now. You don't know if it works, but it makes you feel like you're doing something. Anything. Historians still argue whether the social role of caretaker gave women elevated status or simply deeper invisibility. You have no time for the debate. You are too busy trying to keep your child alive with steamed radish and hope. Your son begins to eat again. Slowly. He lifts the rice bowl himself. His skin is warm, but not boiling. The cough fades like retreating thunder. You don't smile right away. You wait another day, and then another. Only then do you exhale. But you don't rest. You can't. You still have laundry. Still have rice to rinse, mats to sweep, siblings to scold. The world doesn't pause for your relief. You tuck your gratitude into a quiet corner of your chest, next to the fear that never really leaves. You watch your son, sleep breath steady, now face soft. You whisper, "You came back." He stirs, but doesn't wake. And then in the dead silence of night, you cry. Not loudly, not for long, just enough. You wake to the distant toll of a bell, long, low, and slow. A death bell. Somewhere in the village someone has passed. You pause, hands still wet from rinsing rice, and bow your head. You don't know who it is yet, but you know what comes next. Death in feudal Japan isn't just an event. It's a ceremony, a disruption, a responsibility. The body may be gone, but the work has only begun. And for women like you, the real labor starts after the last breath. You learn by midday that it's your neighbor's husband, old, hunched, always chewing miso beans like they were made of gold. Gone. You expected it. He'd been coughing all winter. But still, the loss leaves a silence, a rippling pause through the narrow alleyways. Everyone lowers their voices. Everyone watches the house. And then the preparations begin. You go over. Of course you do. It's expected. Women help other women with death. Not just out of kindness, but because no one else will. You find her your neighbor, kneeling in the entryway, hands limp, eyes hollow. You don't speak, you just begin. You roll up your sleeves. You bring water. You light incense. You hang the white cloth on the doorframe, a signal to the world grief lives here now. Here's your historical fact. Death rites in Edo period Japan, blended Buddhist beliefs, Shinto rituals, and regional customs. The body was often washed and dressed by women, usually close relatives or neighbors, before being placed in a seated or lying position for the wake. The process could last days, depending on social standing and weather. You wash his hands, slowly, carefully, warm cloths that cool too fast. You change his robe. You tuck his arms neatly across his chest. You avoid his eyes. Even though they're closed, you bow once deeply, then continue. His wife, your friend, in a quiet sort of way, is lost in grief. You guide her gently. You tell her where to sit, how to hold the prayer beads, when to nod, when to bow. You become her body while hers falters. There's a child crying somewhere in the house. You go to them. You distract them with rice balls and soft words. You sing a lullaby with no tune. Your voice is barely audible, like the hum of a reed in water. It's enough. Neighbors arrive with offerings, flowers, incense envelopes with coins. Each gesture is its own kind of language. We see you. We mourn with you. We hope this is enough. You bow each time. You arrange the offerings by color scent weight. You make it beautiful, not for vanity, but because death demands beauty. A fringe tidbit: in some regions, it was customary for the widow to cut a lock of her hair and place it with the body, a symbolic gesture of loyalty beyond death. You see her hesitate. You offer the scissors. She nods. One snip, a strand of black across old linen. Historians still argue whether these rituals offered women emotional catharsis or simply doubled their burden. Either way, you're tired, but you keep moving. Because no one else can. The funeral will be tomorrow. The body will be cremated if wood can be found, and the monks are free. Ashes will be placed in a small urn. The family will light incense for 7 days straight. You'll bring food, keep children quiet, manage small logistics so grief can take up space. And after the ceremony, when the guests have gone, you will sit with her, the widow. You will pour her tea she won't drink. You'll tell her the fire burned cleanly. The smoke rose straight, good omens, even if they're not true. You'll say, he looked peaceful. You won't mention the swelling, or the smell, or the way your own hands still tremble. She'll cry. Maybe. Or not. Some widows don't. Some just sit for days not moving. That's allowed. You'll be there either way. Later at home, you scrub your hands with ashes and water, a form of purification. Not because you're afraid of ghosts exactly, but because death clings to the sleeves, to the skin, to the corners of your mind. You tuck your own robe into the wash basin. You change into one that doesn't smell like smoke. You hold your children a little longer than usual. You watch them breathe in their sleep. You don't say anything. You just listen to the rhythm of life. You know your time will come too. One day, when your breath leaves quietly, or not so quietly, and you hope fiercely that someone like you will be there to wash your hands, to tie your sash, to keep the rice warm for the mourners. Because in death as in life, women hold the world together, even when the world forgets to thank them. The fire's crackling low tonight. Not cozy, just functional. You're crouched next to it, threading a needle under weak lamplight, patching yet another elbow, another frayed hem. You're on your third robe repair this week, and the fabric feels as thin as rice paper. You sigh not loudly enough for anyone to hear. Your husband is in the main room reading aloud from a borrowed scroll about virtue. Not yours, his. Samurai code. Honor. Discipline. Loyalty. The usual. You nod occasionally to show respect, even though your thoughts are elsewhere, like whether you remembered to soak the barley or if the rain seeped through the thatch again. You don't live in a samurai house, but the rules they live by ripple down to yours. Everything flows downward. In this world, wealth pressure consequences. And if a samurai woman makes a mistake, it's scandal. If a peasant woman does, it's just Tuesday. Still, those rules are always looming. And punishment, when it comes, is never equal. Here's your historical fact. The Edo period was deeply hierarchical, not just by class, but by gender within each class. While samurai men followed the Bushido code, women were expected to uphold something called Onna Daigaku, the Great Learning for Women, a manual that emphasized obedience, modesty, and total submission to fathers, husbands, and sons. Break those rules. The consequences depended on your rank and your gender. A man might face a dual exile or ritual suicide. You got shame. Real public soul, deep shame. You remember the girl from 2 villages over, 15, maybe 16, caught whispering to a stable boy after sunset. Her family shaved her head and locked her indoors for a year. Not a noble family, just strict. People stopped visiting. Her mother avoided the market. Her younger sister's marriage prospects dropped like a stone in a pond. Was she in love? Was she just lonely? It didn't matter. The punishment was the same. You saw her once, standing behind the paper screen, her scalp barely covered with a headcloth, eyes hollow. You waved. She didn't wave back. Maybe she didn't see you. Maybe she wasn't allowed to. In samurai families, a similar disgrace could end in death. Quiet. Controlled. The girl kneeling in white. The family sword drawn by a male relative. It wasn't common, but it happened. Honor demanded it, they said. Historians still argue how often these punishments were truly enforced versus how often they were simply threatened into submission. But the fear was real. And fear is its own kind of enforcement. Even in your house, far from blades and scrolls, shame has weight. Your neighbor's daughter married poorly into a house with rumors. Her husband drinks. Her mother-in-law mocks her in public, but she can't leave. Leaving would bring disgrace, not just to her, but to her parents, her brothers, even her niece. She walks with her eyes lowered, her laughter gone. The worst part, she still bows to you like she's the one who failed. You once asked your husband long ago what would happen if you left. Just a question. He didn't hit you. He didn't yell. He just said, you wouldn't. And he wasn't wrong. A fringe tidbit, some women carved tiny protective talismans into the backs of their hairpin symbols meant to shield them from misfortune, or perhaps from bad men. You've always wondered what kind of quiet desperation inspires someone to inscribe prayers into something so delicate. Tonight, you tuck your daughter into bed and smooth her hair. She asks, what happens if a girl runs away? You pause. You choose your words carefully. She gets very tired, you say softly. And sometimes, if she's lucky, someone kind finds her. She nods, eyes already closing. She doesn't understand yet, but she will. Because being a woman in this time means knowing how to avoid shame more than how to pursue joy. It means tiptoeing around rules. No one fully explains rules that change based on mood, class, and who's watching. You don't get to challenge them, not openly, but sometimes you resist in smaller ways. You make jokes with other women at the well, You teach your daughter how to question things quietly, carefully, with a smile. You carve a protective symbol into the underside of her bento box, just in case. And when you patch your own robe, you don't use black thread. You use red, bright, defiant, hidden just for you. You're kneeling beside the altar, fingers pressed in prayer, but your mind is elsewhere. You're counting days, not for a festival, not for a birthday, for your cycle. Because in this world, your worth is tethered tightly to one thing: your womb. It doesn't matter how well you cook, how spotless your home is, how precisely you fold the laundry or arrange the altar offerings. If you are not producing children, specifically sons, you are failing. Quietly, completely. You feel it when your mother-in-law eyes your stomach too long. You hear it in the neighbor's greeting. How are you feeling these days? Always paired with a too knowing smile. You feel it most when another woman announces her pregnancy, and people turn to you with that mix of sympathy and judgment that makes your chest clench like a locked box. A historical fact: fertility was not just a personal matter, it was a duty. A wife's main purpose, particularly in samurai or merchant families, was to produce male heirs who could carry on the family name and property. No sons. That could mean a concubine or divorce. Yes, divorce. He doesn't have to yell. He doesn't have to be cruel. He simply has to say the words, "You have failed to give me a child," and the law allows him to send you back to your family. With shame, with stigma, with fewer chances for remarriage than a cracked tea bowl has of being sold again. So you pray, not for yourself, for the seed to take root, for the blood to stop, for a flutter beneath your ribs, and when it comes, that brief whisper of nausea, that heaviness in your limbs, you hold your breath and don't exhale for weeks. You begin walking more carefully, sleeping more, eating what the healer recommends: root vegetables, sesame warm soups, rice porridge. You avoid strong scents. You whisper thanks to every altar in town. Your husband does not ask how you feel, but he stands taller, more confident, already certain it's a son. You can't afford to doubt. But the weeks stretch on, and something's not right. You know before the pain comes. It's not sharp, but deep. Like the ground beneath your life has shifted. Blood. So much blood. You do what you're trained to do. You clean it. You hide the cloth. You smile through dinner, even as you feel yourself unraveling. No one notices. The next morning, you rise early. You make rice. You braid your daughter's hair. You light incense like nothing happened. Because if you let it show, if you grieve out loud, you invite blame. A fringe tidbit: some women crafted small dolls out of scrap cloth megawari meant to absorb misfortune. They'd burn them after a miscarriage, believing the doll had taken the loss in their place. You consider making one. You don't. There's no time, and the firewood is too damp. Historians still argue whether these rituals gave women emotional release or simply masked suffering and pageantry. You're too tired to care. You just want to sleep without dreaming. Your husband does not mention the child again, and in the weeks that follow, the questions return. No news yet, still waiting. How lucky your home is so quiet. The words sting more than silence ever could. You want to scream, but instead, you smile. You do get pregnant again. Eventually. And again. And once it's a boy. The relief is not joy, it's survival. He's loud, strong, demanding. And when he cries, people say, "What a healthy heir." No one says you look pale. No one asks how you're healing. You are once more the vessel, not the story. But you don't care, because now they stop asking. They stop hinting. For a time, you are safe. And that's all you ever dared to ask for. The paper lanterns flicker in the wind as you step barefoot across the courtyard stones, their smoothness worn from generations of footsteps just like yours. Tonight is festival night Matsuri, and for a brief glowing moment, the rules relax, not vanish. Never that. But loosen like a tightly knotted obi undone for a breath of air. Your daughter runs ahead chasing fireflies and the scent of grilled mochi from the vendor cart near the shrine. You've let her wear her favorite indigo yukata, and even though the hem is slightly frayed, it flutters like a noble woman's robes as she spins. You're allowed to smile tonight. Not the modest folded hand smile you wear like armor, but a real one. The kind that creases your cheeks and makes your eyes squint. No one minds. No one scolds. Because this is a festival, and the village needs release as much as it needs rice. Here's your historical fact. Matsuri festivals were held throughout the Edo period, tied to the agricultural calendar and Shinto rituals. They were loud, colorful, and often chaotic, a break from hierarchy, at least on the surface. Even samurai families participated, though, with more formality. But for most women, these events offered a rare sliver of visibility. You pass through the crowd, like steam, visible but untouchable. You bow to the shrine maidens. You offer a coin too, if you're feeling bold. You clap twice, bow once, and whisper a wish you'll never repeat. Not even to yourself. Around you, people laugh freely. Drums echo like heartbeats. The lanterns swing. The air smells of charcoal plum wine and roasted chestnuts. You let yourself buy one, just one, and break it in half for your daughter. She thanks you with her mouth full, and for once, no one corrects her. The dance begins. Women in yukata step into the circle, moving in slow unison around the drummers. You hesitate, not because you don't know the steps you do. Every village girl learns them, but because dancing means being seen. It means letting go of the quiet you've worn so long it's become your second skin. But your daughter pulls you forward, laughing, begging. You can't say no, so you join. You move awkwardly at first, hands uncertain, feet remembering too slowly. But the rhythm carries you. It always does. Left, right, turn, clap. The same steps your mother danced. The same steps her mother taught her. And then you stop thinking. You move like wind. Like water. Like someone whose body belongs to her, even if just for tonight. A fringe tidbit in some towns, women used to tie small written wishes to the sleeves of their yukata during festivals. Hopes for love, fertility, or escape. At the end of the night, they'd burn them in tiny ceremonies, believing the smoke would carry their desires upward. You don't tie a wish tonight. You are the wish. After the dance, you walk with your daughter past the lanterns floating on the river. Each one represents a prayer, a soul, a memory. You light one together. She asks whose name you whispered. You don't answer. She doesn't press. Back home, you help her out of her robe. You comb her hair by lamplight. She's quiet, sleepy, full of rice cakes, and stories she'll retell tomorrow, as if they were myths. Your husband returns late, slightly flushed, still humming the festival tune. He doesn't comment on your dancing. Maybe he didn't see. Maybe he did. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because for a moment, you were not a wife, not a vessel, not a servant. You were simply alive. And that memory, that's yours. To keep. To return to claim. The paper walls do nothing to block the shouting. You sit perfectly still, hands in your lap, listening to your husband argue with his older brother in the next room. You can't make out every word, but you don't need to. It's about money. It always is. Debt, harvest, obligations. You are invisible in this conversation, but you will feel every outcome. When they finish, your husband storms past you, not acknowledging your presence. You don't flinch. You don't follow. You just start calculating what must now be done. He tells you 2 days later you'll be taking in a boarder, a distant cousin's son, 13. Quiet, he says. Easy to manage. You nod. He adds, less rice in the bowl for us, but he'll work. It's temporary. You know it's not temporary. This isn't new. Families shifting burdens around like game pieces. When money tightens, space tightens. And you must stretch to fill the gaps. The boy arrives with a tied cloth of belongings and a polite bow. You bow back. His hands are calloused, his eyes downcast. You feed him. You find him a corner of the sleeping room. You show him where the bucket is. You explain the house rhythm in simple, steady tones. And then you return to work. Because the work never stops. A historical fact, extended family arrangements were common in Edo period Japan, especially in lower and middle-class households. Children were often sent to relatives as laborers, apprentices, or simply to reduce the strain on their birth families. Women took on the brunt of this reshuffling, managing more mouths with the same handful of rice. You begin waking earlier. One more bowl to prepare, one more robe to wash. You sew him a new sash from an old sleeve. You monitor his cough. You learn his food preferences before he ever says a word. He speaks rarely. But one day, as you're washing daikon, he says softly, "Your rice is better than my mother's." You don't smile, but your chest tightens. You tell your daughter to be kind to him. She's wary. At first, her space has been shrunk, her routines disrupted. But children adjust faster than adults. She teaches him the prayer chant. He shows her how to fold paper into birds. You watch from the edge of the room, pretending not to. The house feels heavier, but also more alive. You find yourself listening for his footsteps in the morning. When he's late, you worry. One day, your husband mentions another cousin, this one in the city, looking for a girl to help in their shop. Your daughter looks up. She's only 10. But you know the clock has started. She will leave soon. Not now. Maybe not this year, but soon. And so you begin teaching her more. How to bow properly to merchants. How to fold a letter. How to hide coin inside her sleeve seam. How to boil ginger when her stomach cramps. A fringe tidbit, some women taught their daughters secret hand signs, barely noticeable movements used in the marketplace to signal danger, theft, or disapproval without alerting men. You invent one of your own, just in case. Historians still argue whether these makeshift multi-generational households empowered women by giving them informal authority or merely trapped them in permanent unpaid labor. You feel both truths at once. You are the hub, the one who remembers, who likes pickled plums, and who hates the texture of tofu. The one who knows which child cries from pain and which cries from dreams. And when things go wrong, because they always do, you are the one who absorbs the fallout. One night, the cousin's boy returns late, smelling of sake, eyes rimmed red. Your husband scolds him, not loudly, but coldly. The boy bows, but his hands shake. You give him a warm cloth. You make him drink water. You say nothing else. He doesn't speak either. But the next morning, he helps you carry the firewood without being asked. You notice that. And tuck it away, because in this house where words are few, and work is endless, the only real language is what you do for each other when no one's watching. The days grow longer again. Not warm yet, but promising. You wake to birds you haven't heard in months and light that slices gently through the paper screens. You stir barley porridge over the fire, and for once the flames don't fight you. And then a message arrives. Not a letter paper is too dear for that. A folded scrap of old cloth passed hand to hand until it finds you. Inside an invitation. The head matron of the Weaving Guild is coming. To observe. To possibly choose an apprentice. A girl. Your daughter. You read it twice. Your hands tremble, not from fear, but from the weight of hope. It's not a promise, but it's a door. A door you weren't sure would open at all. You begin preparations. Not for the matron, for your daughter. You teach her how to speak formally, but gently. How to stand without fidgeting. How to answer questions without seeming either too proud or too timid. The thin, wobbly tightrope girls must walk. You pull out your finest comb. You help her wash with warm water and rice bran. You lend her your best sash, the red one embroidered with plum blossoms, so faded they're almost imaginary. She doesn't say thank you. She just looks at you with wide, silent eyes. That's enough. A mainstream historical fact artisan guilds in the Edo period, particularly in urban areas, offered rare routes for women to gain semi-independent status. As weavers, dyers, even midwives. Admission was difficult training harsh, but the alternative was often marriage or labor. For a girl with skill, it could mean a different life. You don't go with her to the interview. That would be overstepping. You watch from the porch as she walks away, back straight knots in her obi, exactly where they should be. Her footsteps are quiet, but your heart is thunder. While she's gone, you clean without focus. You fold and refold. You check the rice water 3 times. You burn incense at the altar and whisper a prayer you've never dared form aloud. Let her go farther than I did. She returns hours later, cheeks flushed, not smiling, not crying. She simply says, "They said I'm not the worst." You laugh. You can't help it. Not the worst is practically praise. Over the next week, she visits the weaver's house 3 times. Each time, she's more confident. She tells you about looms, as if she were describing ships. She begins humming while sweeping. Her fingers twitch when she sees patterns in floorboards, in clouds and rice grains. You recognize the look. It's what freedom looks like before it knows its name. There's a fringe tidbit you recall in some towns mothers would secretly weave a small symbol into their daughter's first practice cloth, something only they'd recognize. A hidden blessing. A thread of memory. You're not a weaver, but you stitch a tiny plum blossom into your daughter's sleeve cuff anyway. Just in case. Historians still argue whether these apprenticeships truly liberated women or simply confined them to a different kind of cage. But to you, even a larger cage with a window is worth the effort. Then comes the decision. Your daughter is chosen. Not as full apprentice. Not yet. As a helper. But it's the first step. She'll walk to the weaver's house each morning. She'll learn by watching, by sweeping by, serving tea, and listening carefully. And in time, if she proves herself, she'll take the loom into her own hands. You pack her a lunch. You fix her hair. You kiss the top of her head and pretend it's just another day. But when she leaves, the house is too quiet. You sit by the hearth. You sip bitter tea. You pick up your mending and stare at it for a long while before setting it down. This is what you wanted. This is what you worked for. This is what every burned hand and sleepless night was building toward. And yet it hurts, because letting go is the only thing harder than holding on. But you do. With pride, with grace, with one hidden thread of your own. The cicadas are singing again. Loud, rhythmic, almost rude. Summer is fully here, pressing against the paper walls with hot fingers and thick breath. You've rolled up the floor mats. You've hung mosquito nets. You've tied your hair back in a tight knot and told the children to stay in the shade. It's too hot to cook properly, so you soak noodles in cold water, slice cucumbers, paper thin, and crush ice from the merchant's cart with a wooden mallet. Your hands never stop moving, even in the heat, especially in the heat. But something feels different now. The house, though, still loud and full, breathes easier. Your daughter leaves early for the weaving house and returns with fingers inked in dye and stories that tumble over each other like river stones. She talks more now, laughs more, stands taller. You still wash her robes, still mend her sleeves, but she corrects you now on pattern names and fabric grades. You let her, proudly. The boy cousin, once shy and shadowy, now helps your husband in the garden without being asked. He makes bad jokes and blushes when your daughter rolls her eyes. You don't say anything, but you notice the way he carries 2 buckets now instead of 1. A historical fact, women in Edo, Japan were considered the moral and logistical backbone of the household, and this role extended to the emotional realm as well. You weren't just the cleaner and cook, you were the quiet manager of moods, dreams, and transitions. When children changed, when seasons shifted, when a husband faltered, it was your job to keep everything stitched together. You notice small things. Your husband comes home earlier now. Not always, but often. He asks about the dye stains on your daughter's hands. He listens when you say, "The rice yield looks promising." He even nods. Once he brought you a comb. Not new, but polished. You said thank you without sarcasm. That's progress. The neighborhood feels less tense. No major illness this month. No deaths. No visits from taxmen. Just regular days with regular noise. You learn to love the rhythm, even the messy parts. Especially the messy parts. You still get tired. Your joints still ache before storms. You still forget what rest feels like. But you've also begun to walk slower through the garden, lingering longer under the eaves, when the rain falls, watching droplets trace down the old roof tiles like tiny silver threads. There's a fringe tidbit you recall. Now, some women believed that if you could tie a ribbon around your wrist during the full moon and keep it clean for 30 days, your next season would be lucky. You try it. You don't tell anyone. The ribbon is made from your daughter's old sash. It holds. Historians still debate the true scope of women's power in this era. You wonder if maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe it's not about power. Maybe it's about presence, persistence, the ability to shape a whole life out of service and sweat and silence and still make space for joy. One morning, you step outside and see your daughter bent over the dye basin, her hair loose, her face splattered blue. She turns, sees you, and grins. It's wide, unfiltered. Hers. You laugh, out loud. She blinks, then joins you. And in that shared moment, you realize something deep in your bones. You've given her more than survival. You've given her possibility, and that in this world is everything. The cicadas fade with the dusk, their song replaced by the hum of crickets and the soft breath of wind through old bamboo. The lantern light casts a gentle glow across the room, catching in the weave of the tatami and the curve of your daughter's sleeping face. You sit quietly by the window, sipping tea, gone lukewarm, letting the night stretch long around you. It's warm, but not stifling. just enough to remind you that the day is done. Outside, the garden settles. A frog croaks once. Then again. A breeze tugs the laundry line. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor closes a sliding door with the softest thump. Everything feels slower now. Softer. As if the world itself is winding down, folding its corners, tucking in its edges. You breathe a little deeper. You shift your weight just slightly. You notice for once how quiet your own body has become. This is the moment you've earned. Not just rest, but recognition. A whispered kind of honor that doesn't need ceremony or scrolls. You're still here. Still whole. Still quietly, fiercely alive. Now let your eyes close. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the crickets. And let sleep carry you someplace gentle just for a while.